Alright, we have two different impressions here of the exact same lower mandibular arch that I'm going to do a contrasting comparison with one impression where the alginate was too runny and another one where it was the perfect consistency. First of all, let's view the very front of the tray. You can see here on this one where the material was too runny, you can actually see some of the actual holes, the retention holes that are still visible. The material, the alginate, was actually pushed out of the way by the mouth muscles because the alginate was too runny. You can see a hole here, here, and here, and you can see that the tray is still showing through. I'll highlight it here with this pencil. On this impression, you can see that there is a small portion of the tray that's showing through, but the majority of it is covered up, and you can see there's a large rounded type of border as opposed to this sharp contrasting border right here. Let's hold this up and show you. You see how thin this is? This is thin because the alginate was thin and the muscles were pushing the material out of the way. I can move that with the end of the pencil there. You can see how thin it is, as opposed to this, to where it is larger, thicker, and more rounded. It's not just, it doesn't come to a point. If we also observe on the very back in the retromolar pad area or the back of the mouth, you can see these here are very thin, very flimsy, because again the material was wet and the muscles were pushing the material out of the way. Whereas on this, they are thicker, they hold their shape, and there's a much more rounded vestibule all the way through the mucobuccal fold as well as on the inside, on the lingual. So in comparing and contrasting both of them, you can see the difference. You can also see how the tray back here on this one is actually showing through. And you can see the borders of the stock tray, whereas with this one it's not as visible and it's a little more defined on the borders. Let's flip it over and see what the difference is between a runny and a perfect consistency. On the runny side, you'll be able to see that not all the material, even though the tray was seated, not all the material made its way or was pushed up through the retention holes. Here on the very back portion, you can actually see it's almost a concave type of hole right here, as opposed to the holes that are here where most all of the material is pushing through, just like those typical Play-Doh models that you use where you put the Play-Doh in, squish down, and the hair comes out. You can see how much more defined these ones are than these, and how they're coming through almost all of the holes as opposed to the runny model where it's only coming through the front. And so please make sure that when you do seat the material, that if you're not getting all of the material to push through those retention holes, then you probably have a mix that's too runny. Looking on the sides, you can see how well defined those borders are and how it's coming up and over and around the tray. The lip line is right here, whereas on this one, comparing both side to side, you can see the material is kind of flimsy and just all over the place. There's no really well defined borders here as opposed to here. And last of all is the ability of, if you have a wet mix, that the material pulls away. Can you see how I can put a little bit of pressure on this and pull that front section right next to that labial freedom away with just a little bit of pressure, because the material was running. Same thing back here on the flanges of the tray. Just a little bit of pressure pulls that away, which is cause for distortion, whereas here I can apply a lot of pressure and nothing pulls away. Same thing with here. Because the material has gone around the borders of the tray and is stiff and holding to itself, you don't get that flimsy reaction like you do here as opposed to here. Okay? So those are comparing one that was flimsy and one that was